I hope that everyone who wanted to participate in the last session have returned to the room. Please welcome Olga Makarova with her presentation on network neutrality. Network neutrality. This is one of the more popular non-political topics that is worth discussing from all points of view. We will not talk about the technology, we will not talk about legislation, or rather Russian legislation. We'll talk about other countries' legislation. Net neutrality was first introduced by Tim Wu, an author of Master Switch, and Harvard's expert. In this book, he describes a cycle of transformation of a hobby into a business, and then of a business into a corporation or a cartel, and then he describes a phase when the more open areas become more closed, and then more closed areas become again more open. So the big question that is put in this book is whether the internet will be able to topple down the cycle theory, or with time internet will become the biggest regulation target and centralization objects. So we'll try to answer this question, and for this we need to understand what kind of innovation is the internet. We're firstly interested in the so-called disruptive innovations that destroy markets, that fully replace old markets with the new ones. The same happened to telegraphy and telephony at the end of the 19th century, but it hasn't happened yet to the internet industry. It is interesting to note that Klein Christensen introduced this term, disruptive innovation. He spoke about disruptive technology originally, and then a bit later the word technology was replaced with the word innovation, because it's not the technology but the business model that revolutionizes the market. Another thing, there was another economist called Joseph Schumpeter. He is the preacher of innovations, and he is the author of one simple economic theory which proved to be very resilient. So the basis of this theory is that innovations and economic growth are basically one and the same thing. So when later we'll discuss the decisions of FCC, we will be reminded of Schumpeter's theory. The countries where inventions are made get richer, and other countries stagnate, but innovations is not a peaceful and calm process. It's a cycle, and it's a cycle that is similar to any other biological cycle, which begins with birth and ends up in death. I will not give examples of disruptive innovations. You are all familiar with the with the best examples. And there's another thing which means a lot to us in the context of net neutrality, but we're using a different phrase. It's not net neutrality, and it is something that conflicts with net neutrality. Technological neutrality is what I have in mind. Technological neutrality is related to convergence of telecommunications, mass media, and information technology. And based on that, in 2002, European Union developed a framework document called EU NTS. Our own Russian law on telecommunication was based on those 4 European laws, which introduced the principle of technological neutrality. That principle can be worded as follows: regardless of the technological platform or means to provide a service, its regulation will be subject to the nature of the service and not the technology of its delivery. So if you are providing TV, it doesn't matter how you do it. It must be regulated as a TV, as television. Now, as a side note on technological neutrality, that principle was successfully applied by Europe to manage radio frequencies. In 2008, a report was adopted on the violence access platform for electronic communication services, which was worded as follows: any telecom service can be provided in any frequency using telecom network of any type. No frequency can be reserved on exclusivity terms, only to provide a certain type of services. So this principle opened up the possibility of mobile data transfer. It's interesting that the principle was specifically designed for WiMAX, and the technology itself died before the principle was adopted. But then LTE replaced WiMAX, and the law is still living. It's not the technology that disrupts the market, it's the business model, and the business model will be the center of our presentation here. Net neutrality and what Wikipedia writes about it and what happens in fact. If you open the English article, the English language article on net neutrality, you'll find that net neutrality proponents claim that this idea has existed a long time ago. Its founder was Western Union, the company. A couple words about Western Union and net neutrality. In the early 1900s, the head of Western Union was Hess, one murky politician from Ohio. He didn't have many advantages except for one. He was a relative of the AP agency, Associated Press. Associated Press was affiliated with the Western Union. That was a benefit, and this benefit was enough for Hess to run for president. I have to say that the president elections have not always been successful for Hess, and then Western Union started utilizing this quote-unquote net neutrality. Some messages never got through, other messages went straight to Associated Press, and other messages were delayed. Whether Western Union is truly a proponent of net neutrality, well, it's up to you. You should decide for yourselves. Telephony, all internet people hate telephony people. They believe that the main trouble for the internet is telephony, and what happens in the market of net neutrality, well, rather, what happens with net neutrality, telephony guys are not to blame, but I still have to mention them. Theodore Vail, a great person and a most efficient decision maker in the whole history of the United States. He had just one deficiency: he didn't believe in competition. Vail was a proponent of the idea of enlightened monopoly. The idea boiled down to having a monopoly, the rightly constructed monopoly, which will only be able to provide the market. Only a monopoly, well-structured monopoly, can provide the operator with the money that it can invest into the development of the network to satisfy the market in products and services. I have to say that Vail today has many aficionados, but they hide under different masks. If you remember about all the, I mean, if you know of all the attempts to regulate the internet, I think you know what I mean. Vail left AT&T after him. It's a huge corporation, a great corporation, but they're trying to strike the right balance between, the long-term communication subsidized local communications. At the end of last century, AT&T was engaged in the rebalancing of tariffs. Telecommunication Regulation Handbook provides the whole story. And they were trying to identify a charging scheme for telephony that would enable development of local telecommunications. Such charging schemes were found, and they were based on the win-win scenarios. The biggest win goes to the person who picked up the phone. He pays the operator, and then the operator shares the money with everybody downstream. And the same happens on the other side. So these models were imposed onto internet, and they failed. These models do not work online. They do not work in the internet environment. Life taught us that lesson. And the first non-working model was adopted at the end of 1990s when we had modem pools. In the United States, the internet operators are information services operators, they're not telecom operators. For the internet to develop in a healthy fashion and for it to grow without excessive regulation, a modern pool was created, an alternative telecom operator was established, the traffic was one way, and the incumbent operator paid this alternative operator. Obviously, everyone realized that that's a scheme, and people started complaining to FCC. FCC didn't take the decision fast; it procrastinated, and the decision appeared only when it no longer made sense, when there was no dial-up left in the market. But in the UK, it was something different. They used the principle of net neutrality. Internet operators and internet service providers were called operators, and they had to pay for the service of initiating a call at a fixed rate. So this is probably the greatest battle between the internet model and the telephony model, and nothing else comes to mind, really. Now, the internet emerged through a different mechanism. It was never associated with business. It was always associated with an academic, scientific, and military race. The Pentagon wanted a reliable network. It was placed in the less reliable network possible into the universities, but the universities proved to be the best soil for innovations at the time when the internet. I'm skipping some of the slides and some points of history because I don't have much time. So when the internet appeared in the market without any government or any other support, the internet developed its own models, which varied greatly from the telephony charging models. And the internet models were basically, there were 6 transition-free operators that were connected each to each. Once you won, they exchanged traffic between themselves, and everybody else joined them, and they paid them. So the joining party, so these 6 operators, they were later called Tier 1, and the others that joined the Tier 1, they have always been downstream. Downstream has always paid upstream, but downstream was never prohibited from having its own downstream. And the complexity level was infinite. Internet generated the following principles, which differed from the principles in telephony. On-net price is always equal to off-net traffic price. And the second principle, if you pay for the pipe, take everything. And this is the principle that originated net neutrality principle. What is interesting is that in its own time, main resources were concentrated in the United States, and to connect to the network, you had to rent channels. 4% of the rent went into the U.S. Internet Development Center or Foundation. In 2000, the countries in the Asia-Pacific decided that it was not a very good idea, and they went to ITU with an idea of changing the payment scheme. United States and Canada were dead against that, but eventually we ended up with DS3 recommendation, which said that, hey guys, let's live peacefully and let's try to find an agreement. So it seemed like that was the end. Well, that was the end of regulation top-down, but in terms of bottom-up regulation, it only just started. It began with an attempt to prove what is more important, the network or the content. Peering wars. Peering wars were started. Chicken tactics was used. The conflicting parties just switched off traffic between them. Genuity and Exodus were the first warring parties. That was at the end of 90s. Exodus was content, Genuity had the network, and well, no, it's the other way around. Or Genuity thought that to carry content all over the country was too heavy for it, and it put down the content provider.
The restored their positions. So there was a conflict that not so many people are aware of, but in the year 2003 there was a more serious global peering war between OWL and Cogent. It was about Cogent. AOL thought that they would have to be selling their content. The AOL network was closed, so they thought that they would exchange traffic, and there was more traffic to AOL, so it would cost them $75,000, and Cogent didn't want to pay any money, and AOL stopped their peering sessions. In some schools, people were deprived of any and all connectivity. Then the peer was established again, but that phone principle imposition failed, and that actually ended all those peering wars, as it were. And seems like neither of those that were involved in that battle had any telephone routes. And there was another event that we called in network neutrality. It was the KSTU versus Cox. Cox was a cable television operator that wanted to get $70,000 for letting KSTU put their content into their cable networks. The KSTU didn't have such money, and they wanted instead to broadcast over the internet. Cox went to the court screaming out that they were being robbed. There was a decision made that they didn't have to charge any money from KSTU, and they lost that litigation. And by the way, in terms of broadcasting, it was a television-like service, and Cox couldn't do much about that. In actual fact, content and network, they are two rivaling parties. How I'm going to use this network to send my content? In the United States of America, where everything started and where all these neutrality principles were established, the most popular thing is television. And it's more popular than anywhere else on any other continent. And it's proved that in the emerging economies, people are ready to pay 3% from their income on television and 5% in the more developed countries. So they are currently sharing and splitting this 5%, and I would like to put it in their pockets. The global peering battle that started in the year 2005 and went until 2008 was not that interesting. Cogent was selling that transit at a cheaper price than all the others. People were against them, but they survived, and they still remain, and they are still operational. But it does not really relate to any neutrality. There was an attempt to impose a telephone-like model in Russia in 2003, when Transtelecom had announced that they found that magic solution, and it was the philosopher's stone, as it were, and they wanted to impose this model. Cable and wireless was being offered to large-scale players and smaller players. If the cable and wireless principle had been successful, everyone would have been paying money for cable and wireless connectivity. But that was not suitable for big companies. Therefore, in the year 2003, they established a separate peering group, Articom, M2 Intel, and TV Ross. I think there was Golden Telecom back then, who joined in on very simple conditions: traffic parity, mandatory requirements for having 155 megabits per second bandwidth, and peering contracts with all the companies that they partner with. in the year 2003, they failed to change the situation in the market, but not too many companies were trying to make radical changes. But all those companies joined in and they joined the club. Articom was able to squeeze out Trans Telecom a little bit in the regional markets. And Teleros was given the opportunity to get some of the Moscow market, and they get competitive advantage. What are the advantages here? The prices for IP transit started dropping, and in Moscow they started developing the international channels leases. ISP and content providers went to the west, and the phone-like model did not actually work. Ultimately, they created the so-called original internet ecosystem, the Russian internet ecosystem. In the year 2008, everything stabilized in the market more or less, and the numerous attempts to impose the phone model to the internet service providers actually stopped. It was silent for a while, but Norton asked two important questions. They asked, what's going to happen if the transit costs would be equal zero, and what would the businesses do if the transit costs will drop to zero? No one knew the answer back in the day, but there were certain prerequisites for that. Access power peering, in other words, that's what it was called by Norton. Comcast, Limelight, and Netflix, and one more company were involved, and they were exchanging traffic over Tier 1. Comcast connected to Netflix connected to send the traffic, and Comcast started offering the paid services for them. Akamai said yes, Limelight said no. They stopped the service, and after a while Limelight had agreed to make it on a paid basis, but then they went to CDN level 3, because the level 3 was offering the more affordable services, and they immediately established the peering agreement. That was the major prerequisite back in the day, and that's what's happening right now in the market. I'm going to skip this slide just for the sake of time. And now I'll just explain how the regulatory procedures were being developed. FCC has always been in favor of innovations, promoting the innovations, and network neutrality. This neutrality can be stipulated in 4 main principles. They were changed at a later time, but in the beginning there was connectivity, free information, acquisition according to the tariff plan that you have selected. FCC prepared the changes in the Communication Act, which dates back to 1996, where internet was not mentioned for that simple reason, so that they avoid re-regulation. And FCC had prepared a document which is entitled Communications and Opportunities Report Act, which contains the main principles of the network neutrality. And in actual fact, at a certain moment in time, it was approved by the Senate. Later, the federal trade wanted them to think about the risks involved and about the users. At the same time, the senator, the head of the subcommittee for commercial trade and tourism, when speaking to the head of the Federal Trading Commission, said that they were a little afraid of the new services, because he cannot relate them to any and all monetization. And he said that Google would have been unable to develop properly if there had been some pricing discrimination involved, which killed all the attempts of FCC to accept the neutrality principles. The law enforcement principles look a little different. The green ones where the network neutrality won, and the red ones where they lost. So it looks very colorful, therefore. But in actual fact, frankly speaking, it was just FCC winning from Medicine River was just the telecom operator, and they had to pay the fine of $15,000. Medicine River signed that, paid the money, and that's it. Then it went worse, and Comcast, together with AT&T, smashed the Communication Opportunities Reform Act, which stipulates the neutrality principles. 229 senators against, and it was not approved. In December 2006, Comcast started blocking BitTorrents traffic. That's where the Associated Press got involved. Comcast was accused of violating the network neutrality principles, and they were fined $16 million, and they wanted to bring the routing policy up to transparent standards. They paid that fine and went to the court, and the court of the appeal decided that the FCC should not have given should not have done it to them, and the FCC could not prove that decision that they made with the law. Then the new decision was made, and the Congress did not allow them to realize that initiative. Then there was an argument between Netflix and Comcast about their quality of the service, and one party wanted the other to pay. The same applies to AT&T, which limits the use of the Apple video conferences. And then everything went pretty bad. AT&T said that if we don't really want the users to charge any money for your content, please pay us the money. The Court of the Appeal proves that the FCC goes beyond the actual right, and it states that the provider of the broadband access has a right to limit the access to any site if they really want to increase traffic to the similar site, and they claim that the broadband provider can decrease the quality of the services. For example, for Bing, if the provider of a similar service, Google, had paid money for prioritizing the access, and it was ended up with signing of the agreement between Comcast and Netflix, and Netflix was obliged to pay money to Comcast. So what happened? It so happened that the cable TV model, as it were, was being enforced in the internet market. For network neutrality is a bad thing. In terms of the technological neutrality is a normal thing. The story is not over yet. FCC had published a 100-page long document about network neutrality, which will be discussed. So let's see what is going to happen. For us, all these items are interrelated. If in the United States of America the neutrality principles are not adopted, it's good for us, because we will be having the content here, because we will not have just purely American models adopted here in Russia. We'll have our own ones, maybe more interesting and more progressive ones that we are currently using. Europe believes that just do everything, but just inform the user about the quality of the service provided and what kind of services you provide. The network neutrality is adopted by the Netherlands in its pure form because there's a lot of specific content. Belgium, France, and Italy listen to the proposal and wait. Should we be crying over network neutrality? No, we shouldn't. Should we cry over internet getting older? No, we should not. Just get older, but contact your cosmetologist and be beautiful, remain beautiful. So remember about the benefits that we can still have, thinking that the neighbors are not going to feel that great. I think very soon all these problems will be forgotten because it's the market principles that regulate such things. It proves that the market is alive. When the market is dead, then it's bad. Has the internet become the undermining innovation? No, it has not become yet. And maybe it's very young yet and it's not quite ready to come up with their own model. So I think we should age beautifully. Somehow or other we will wait and see what's going to happen, but think about the internet today, which is quite complicated. The internet of things, because the things store the habits of the owners, and if it's connected to the World Wide Web, if your refrigerator goes wild and it gives out your personal private data, then it becomes really tough. Those of you who don't believe, just recommend the book which is called John the Computer, which dates back to 1960, and it describes what happens to the Internet of Things when we have just the computer, the only one which has an intellect similar to the human being's intellect. So, and you'll learn what's going to happen with all these prohibitions over the network, and including the legislative prohibitions as well. Open for questions. Thank you very much. Any questions to the speaker? An announcement then. I saw that some of you have a lot of text and a lot of quotes, and I saw people taking pictures. Please don't. We will put it on the website. I mean the slides. If you would like to look through the presentation, please do it. And I would like to thank the speaker myself, because there's a lot of interesting historic information, and you raised quite a number of issues that discussed in Europe about the money flowing in, flowing out, IPv6 implementation, who's going to pay money for IPv6 implementation, etc. Thanks to the speaker. Questions? Maxim was the first with a question. Maxim Taluk, Amsterdam Internet Exchange. You said that internet has not become a creative innovation. That's what you said. No, I said undermining innovation. That's the English term, creative destruction. No, it's a different term. It's an English term and an economic term. And you see, there was the telegraph, which ruled all over the world. Telephony killed the market of telegraphy. The new model actually destroyed the Western Union market by AT&T, but the internet did not destroy and killed either of them, cable TV or telephony. They just used their models, adopted their models. But if you ask service providers what Skype did with international phone calls, nothing, because I work in such a company. Wanted to get the numbers. How much money did Skype steal from us? How much? I don't know. Oh, you don't know. That's a whole different story. But as far as you can see, that the international call services are still being offered. And what's cheaper, to filter the Skype traffic, to filter it, or understand how much money we're actually losing. Maybe we just ignore it. AT&T, toyed with that thingy and they forgot about Skype at all. We are not talking about Skype. We're talking about the heavy content, television content, video streaming, which loads your network with traffic, but not Skype. You work in a telephone provider company. I think we'll invite the speaker in a year with updates. I think these questions will be addressed at a later stage. Next question, please, because please don't slip into personal discussion. We are a public company. You can see what's happening in our company. I mean, in terms of our income, profit and loss, P&L. Thank you very much for an excellent presentation, but I'm interested about what was missing from the presentation. I understand more or less what's happening in the United States, and it seems like that Google in the United States has enough money to buy almost anything. Who? Google does. But Google has so far not bought anything, and AT&T also has plenty of money. But AT&T has less money, much less, and Google Fiber has already been established. So what do you think about Google Fiber? What about Google broadband connectivity services? Well, Google broadband services has not entered our market yet, so I'm neutral about that. And Google offering these services, in actual fact, if Google starts being a broadband service provider, it's going to be quite good, especially in another, somewhere in the Far East, in Siberia. Why not? Why not? In another in Magadan. Let them do so and become the broadband service provider there. Olga, the CDN, does it really mean that there'll be more CDN services provided and they start replacing backbones? Does it really mean that there will be a principal change in the business environment? That there is no pure transit left? Because I remember in one of the conferences we discussed this topic, and I don't know any pure transit operator, just the level 3, which is not offering its services in the mass market. All the others work in the mass market. Oh, by the way, I forgot about Retin. So maybe we should readdress this question to them. The operator who is in charge of the backbone services and who is in charge of the local loop unbundling. Of course, the local loop unbundling is the more important, and the backbone is secondary, and Rostelecom is not a backbone provider after Elektrosvязь was attached to it. So we take care of our customers about the quality of the services provided, and the CDN model is an advantage. It's going to give a higher level of services, high quality of services, and better content, so it will make our customers happy. What I meant is CDN is not the transit of traffic, but transit of service. Exactly. The principal change is likely to be expected. The actual landscape has changed, except for Retin. There are no more pure transit operators. Retin, please speak on behalf of Retin. Yes. I will not speak about, pure transit operators. I would like to first thank you, Olga, for an interesting presentation. A lot of information was gathered together in one presentation. Unfortunately, you changed some of the order of the events, making conclusions out of that. But those were intermediary events, and it was done obviously because of the show requirements, but my colleague from Amsterdam and I were quite shocked when you said that internet did not become this and did not become that. and it didn't. I have a different view on that, but when you said that the telephony destroyed the telegraph, but then you said that the internet did not destroy telephony, and again, let me ask this question completely. Let me finish my question. As a phone, mobile, or when was the telephone traffic sent over the ocean via the wire cable, the cable wire? It was because the telegraph was using the underwater cable, and it started in 1870, and the telephony, the local landlines, not the international, but the local ones. What was the year when the telephony signal was sent over the Atlantic Ocean by the cable? For me, it was a great, huge discovery. We were in Denmark speaking to TDC, and they came to the market in the 19th century, and they said that they had connectivity even before whale. I think it was the radio connectivity was established there, not the cable, because you see, Olga, there is an excellent book written by Arthur Clarke, Voice Sent Over the Ocean. The voice was sent over the ocean in 1856. When was the telegraph destroyed by the telephony? So you would say that it was sent by the cable. No, it was sent over the radio signal, radio waves. Okay. It seems like that you are unveiling a very detective story. Alexei, we will listen to your presentation at the next Enog session. Please finish your question. I did. I think you distorted and some of the facts just to make the right conclusions that there is no neutrality in the United States. Internet will flow to Russia, and we should be ready. Are you ready, Alexei? Internet will flow to Russia when it's prohibited in the United States.